Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Liz Kramer. I'm the Executive Director of the Dream Center. And for those of you who are not yet familiar with us, the Dream Center is an acronym delivering resources, education, and access to MSIs, minority serving institutions. And we are a brand new technical assistance center funded by OSEP. In fact, our birthday is October 1st of this year, October 1st of 2024, like so many of you X and M grantees. Just beginning your grant journey. We are starting the center as well. As we launch, we're really looking forward to having way more events to support and get to know you better. Our main goals really are to service any faculty in special education, early childhood special education, early intervention, and related services at minority serving institutions. And the ways that we plan to support you all is we're here to be a resource for the 325X grantees, the 325M grantees, and any faculty member who is looking to receive federal funding to support their special ed and related area programs. We can offer assistance with grant proposal development, grant management, building capacity to have stronger programs to run such projects. And so we also are looking to foster a building of community among faculty from the various minority serving institutions. So this is just going to be the first of many opportunities to get involved. As Maria mentioned, if you can just go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, your name and your university, so we have a feel for who's here. We're here to support you for today. Our purpose is to support you in writing your OSEP annual performance report. We are your friends at the Dream Center, and we're here to help you be very successful in your projects. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Maria, who's going to go over a brief housekeeping.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Maria Silva. I am the project coordinator here for the Dream Center. I'm happy to say that I see some familiar faces in our Zoom room. We met some of you folks last week at CEC, so it was a great opportunity to connect. Just so you all know, this webinar is being recorded and we will share the recording with you afterwards. Also, if you have any questions during the presentation, if you could please put them in the Q&A feature on your Zoom page, and that way our team will be ready to assist you as best as possible. We encourage you in the chat to share your insights or any other information that you'd like to share and engage with your colleagues here. After the main presentation, you will join a grant-specific breakout room that will correlate with the 325Ms or the 325X for you to join for a more personalized discussion regarding your specific type of grant. And also just a reminder, you will receive resources, you will receive a document that shares with you some common errors and solutions for APR reporting. You'll also receive some frequently asked questions, which we hope to continue to gather some of your questions through today's chat. And also you will receive the recording. So now I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Dawn Carroll Ellis. She is the Associate Director here for the Grant Center.
Thank you so much, Maria, and good afternoon, everyone. So we are going to dive into the APR and help you to navigate the APR. During this webinar, we hope that you will learn steps to submitting the annual performance report, aka APR, like frequently asked questions, sections of the report, and frequent errors and how to avoid them. So we know we have a mix of experience levels in the room. Some are novice, some are experts, and many fall somewhere in between. Let's take a quick poll to see where everyone stands. So if you can please just select a response about your APR experience and submit your response so we can kind of get a gauge of where everyone stands. Okay, great. So it looks like we have a lot of first timers. That's good. And then the next level, we have a handful of those that are between 1 and 5. And we do have some experts in the room and of course some in between. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to, excuse me, we're also going to ask for some of those that have a little more experience to share that later on. So the APR is one of the reporting requirements. It's listed in the Federal Register under administrative and national policy requirements. It's also included on the Grant Award Notification, or GAN. Grantees are expected to monitor and required to submit the APR detailing their progress and outcomes. The report is accountability check, and it serves as a form of internal control for OSEP. The APR is due May 2nd and submitted online through e-reports in G5 or G6. It's G5, I call it G5/G6. Okay, who reads the APR and what do they do with it? OSEP project officers read the APR and use a process ensuring that all key information is included and that the reports are complete and aligned with program requirements. This process serves as a quality check, helping to maintain consistency, accountability, and compliance across all grantees. APRs are reviewed collectively with strong reports standing out as exemplars and may be highlighted for best practices. Reports that lack key information or do not fully meet requirements will receive feedback and guidance to resubmit and strengthen future submissions. So what happens if you miss a deadline or submit incomplete information? So no APR submitted, you will definitely hear from your project officer. Again, reports that lack key information or do not fully meet requirements will receive feedback and guidance to resubmit. So we want to make sure that you develop a good reporting calendar or system to avoid last-minute issues. So what are the key components of the APR? The Dear Colleague letter, which you should receive from OSEP dated January 14th, 2025, lists the sections of the Ed 524 form and how to complete it. There are 5 sections, one being the cover sheet, I'm sorry, there are 5 sections in there. And here we have the Dear Colleague letter, which outlines the key components of the APR. So once again, there are 5 sections, and one being the cover sheet. And this is the cover sheet. The cover sheet includes budget expenditures on sections 8A through 8C, and that must be completed by your business office, and we'll get into that a little later. It's important to note on the cover sheet the reporting period, and here we have the dates listed that the reporting period is from March 1, 2024 to February 28, 2025. If this is your first reporting period or your first APR, the reporting period is from the project start date through February 28, 2025. So we will, I think most of the X's, there may be some M's that this is their first time reporting, but I know we will talk about this a little bit more in our breakout for the X's. So if this is your first APR for this particular project, it's going to be a short reporting period. The executive summary is where you can demonstrate whether substantial progress has been made toward meeting the project objectives and the program performance measures. Or it's also a section where you can discuss why targets have not been met. Also, you can discuss what contributions the project has made to research, knowledge, practice, and/or policy. And this is just what it says. It's a summary of the project. And then in the subsequent sections, you'll be able to detail some of that information listed on the slide, or some of the information that the 325Ns should include in their executive summary. Next section, again, as I said, there are 5 sections: the cover sheet, the executive summary, and then the project status chart has 3 sections, A, B, and C. And altogether, those make up the 5 components. So here we're showing a screenshot of the project status chart, section A. And this is where your project objectives will go. And you will identify the type of measure you're reporting on in this section. Once again, it's important to follow the reporting guidance and include, the requested data. This is a screenshot of section B, the budget. In the project status chart, this section requests different information that is listed on the cover sheet. But this is where you will follow the instructions to include budget information about your project. And next, we have section C of the project status chart, additional information. And this section, you can discuss collaborations or partnerships supporting the project you wrote into the application. You can describe changes for the upcoming year, also in this section. So how strict is OSEP about targets, and what happens if I don't meet them? The APR, again, is an accountability check, and it's important to explain why the project didn't meet its targets. Be sure to address progress relating to targets not met from previous APRs and future submissions. So you want to make sure that if you talk about, why a target wasn't met, or give it explanation, or, for not being on task, or even with your budget for the project, it's important to make sure that you follow up on that in the next submission. But OSEP is always there to help. So it's important to, get ahead of any targets being missed or any challenges that you may see, and notify your project officer. So common mistakes for new grantees. We have some listed on the slide, like incomplete or inconsistent data reporting, failure to align activities with grant objectives. I also want to add, not realizing it's okay that you have little to report, and not up to, if this is your first APR for the first project year, you're going to have little to report. So, just try to restrain from giving more information, or like this is going to happen, because it's only been approximately 5 months. I think everyone started on October 1. Also, not obtaining the necessary signature on the cover sheet. So in the Dear Colleague letter, it explains that you need a signature from your grants office or sponsor program office. And so it's really important that you get that information, you get those proper signatures. Large available balances, labs, and how do you explain them properly? On page 6 of the Dear Colleague letter, OSEP reviews data at least quarterly to determine if the grantee's rate of cash drawdown is consistent with the expected expenditures pattern over a project's approved scope of work and project milestone. And the department does apply scrutiny when to grantees with large available balances. You might, be requested to give information. They can also reduce your continuation award. So it's really important that you review the guidance that's listed on page 6 of the Dear Colleague letter. It's on page 6, it talks about how to avoid excessive carryover funds, which may reduce your continuation funds. And if you do anticipate that you're going to have a large available balance and there's going to be a lot of carryover, you can explain this on project status chart, section C, additional information. So also in the APR, you'll have to report on your scholar data, and you'll be collecting data. And that data should be submitted into the Personnel Development Program data collections system. So it's important that you are familiar with the site and their processes. They also offer trainings. Please make sure that you are attending those trainings. So how do you report on service obligation? Here are some tips for reporting on service obligation. The 325N grantees will address any questions regarding service obligation and their reporting during their breakout. And the 325X grantees need to be familiar with the site and, of course, their processes in future years. But the 325Xs will not have to report scholar data for this APR submission. So OSEP project officers are there to assist, for project success. But it's important to report accurate and complete information. I'm going to add to the list on the slide that also not following the instructions from the Dear Colleague letter, for example, not having the budget or your grants office signature on the cover sheet, which is a very big mistake and common for first grantees. And if you need help identifying the right contact for that person to sign the cover sheet, Dream is here to help. And of course, your project officer can help. But you want to make sure that you're not forgetting to provide any supporting documentation that may be needed in your APR. So things to include if you are missing data or didn't achieve targets. If you have concerns about missing data or targets that you didn't meet, discuss it with your project officer and, of course, address it in the APR. You can do that in the executive summary. Depending on the nature of the situation, you may want to provide a heads up before the APR to your project officer. If you know about some challenges early on, you may not, the APR may not be the first time that you want your project officer to hear about it. If you need to explain or request changes, the executive summary, you can include that in the summary and then follow up with details in section C of project status, which is additional information, and that instructions are in the Dear Colleague letter. Here's some ways to keep your project on track, including getting to know who's who in your grants or sponsor program office, or the point of contact responsible for budget or grant matters if your institution doesn't have a dedicated sponsor program office. Also, plan for emergencies. Just ensure that someone else on your team or in your department has access to your project information. Of course, nobody plans to get sick or to be out for extended periods, but emergencies do happen. So we want to make sure that, that someone has access if they have to submit a report in your absence or have to answer questions, from OSEP. Also, they're listed are just simple ways to stay on track during the year. So yes, OSEP has provided tools and templates for reporting that you should be using. In the Dear Colleague letters, there's resource listed, and here's a screenshot, of course, of the project status chart. But also, when possible, make sure you can automate data collection and also use a shared document storage to keep records accessible. So where to go for help? As mentioned in the previous slide, that OSEP has resources listed in the Dear Colleague letter. Of course, you're a project officer, and the reporting guidelines, frequently asked questions, and the Dream Center. These are all good resources to go for when you need help. So being proactive for next year's APR. Again, it's important to plan for emergencies by ensuring someone else has access to the project information, using shared data storage, and also ensuring that you know any challenges or gaps that you reported in this year's APR and making sure that you're picking up where you left off for future submissions. Okay, we're going to go over some common errors in the APR, and this is where we're going to ask later on. We'll kind of ask some of our experts if we're for their input. So incomplete or missing data, that's one of the common errors. And there are special instructions in the Dear Colleague letter for first budget reporting years. So in the resource instructions for grant performance report, if targets were not set for the first budget period, then you enter either the 999 raw number in the column or you enter 999 as a ratio. And there are other examples, but it depends upon which method of reporting, if you're doing raw numbers, percentages, ratios, how you'll be reporting in future data. But this is one of the common errors. It's important to make sure that you're accounting for missing information. So the solution, again, remember to develop an internal tracking system, conduct periodic reviews, and use OSEP templates and guidance to ensure completeness. Another common error is inconsistent data. Changes in data collection methods. So how are you collecting your data and you change without explanation? Again, that's what you can discuss any changes in section C of the project, additional information of the project status chart, discrepancies between narratives and numerical data. And some of here listed are some solutions for ensuring data consistency. Cross-check reported data against previous APR submissions to make sure there are no gaps. Maintain documentation of data sources and methodologies and explain changes. Another common error, insufficient documentation. Lack of records to justify performance claims. And here's some solutions to go with that error. Use testimonies, case studies when applicable, explaining missing data in the executive summary with additional details in the additional information section of the project status chart. Another common error, misalignment with the approved plan. So reported activities do not align with the grant objectives, unclear connection between reported outcomes and reported objectives. And here are the aligning solutions. Remember to always communicate any necessary modifications to your OSEP project officer. So more common errors, vague language, such as progress is being made, no concrete measures to evaluate success, no explanation for deviation from targets. And here are some solutions. Defining clear performance goals. Again, another common error, generalizing or vague reporting. Your narrative does not provide meaningful insights. There's, gaps or just not enough information in your reporting. And here are some solutions to enhancing report clarity. Make sure you are avoiding broad statements and providing concrete examples. Another common error, large available balance. There's significant unspent funds without justification, delays in planned expenditures, no documentation, and not, following up on why there was a large available balance in future years and not connecting the dots between those balances in future submissions. And some solutions, provide clear explanation for any unspent funds, develop a spending plan with a timeline for use. And I'm also going to add here, making sure you have good relationships with your grants office, your sponsor programs, budget office, whoever's responsible on your campus for those types of roles. And make sure that they, understand and you're on the same page about when funds are being drawn down, when they're being allocated. Make sure they're not waiting until the end of the year to pay tuition for scholars, because that money, adds up. And if they're waiting maybe for the end of the year to do fall and spring, and the APR is due in May, and they're not paying that tuition until, like, let's say June for whatever reasons, then that's not good for the APR. And so just having those relationships where you're having those conversations where you can avoid having a large available balance when the grant office has to sign off on the cover sheet. Data collection challenges are another common error, inaccurate scholar data reporting and inaccurate information in the PDP data collection system. So once again, make sure that you know that you're attending the trainings, that you're familiar with the site and using their resources. Lack of tracking for service obligations and discrepancy between scholar training and reported outcome. And here's some tips for strengthening data collection. And once again, it's important to attend training offered by the data collection system, making sure key personnel are also trained. You don't want to be the only one trained. I know, some programs are smaller than others, but it's good, if you can expand your team, if you happen to be that team of one. Another common area, ambiguous reporting requirements. You're unclear on how to interpret certain reporting fields, misunderstanding the measuring type or that you're using for reporting your outcomes, and just confusion on what to include in key sections. And once again, referring to OSEP guidance, getting help when needed, seeking clarification. And now Dream is here to also assist you with clarifying some of those reporting requirements. Another common error, failure to explain data deviations. And failure to include a corrective action plan for unmet targets, and also a plan if you have if there was some miscommunication between you and your budget office or grants office, where a large, available balance, where you can, kind of explain that, having that, that could be a common error also. And once again, including external factors that may have impacted performance, outlining corrective action plan for missed target and future reports, and also in miscommunication or misalignment with your grants office or your budget office can also be a helpful solution. Okay, so we've gone over some common mistakes. Did we miss anything? So we know that there were a number of you. This was not your first APR, not your first time at the rodeo. So, feel free to share. Knowledge is power. Is there anything we've missed? Is there anything that you'd like to share about some common mistakes or mistakes that you made on the APR that we did not cover?
I'll share one. This is Liz. Um, so when I was first entering these, one thing that's a little confusing in the project status chart is if the answer is 0, like if the actual number of scholars who have graduated, if that was one of the goals, is 0, it doesn't accept 0, the system. So I kept getting error messages and I wasn't sure why. But what the system actually wants you to enter is 999. And just an interesting fact. I think it was taught somewhere in a webinar, and maybe it's in a letter, but I missed it the first time and was very stumped by that. So I'm going to share my common mistake that I made.
Thank you, Liz. Any other common mistakes? Anybody want to share? This is a safe space. Also, we'll be creating frequently asked questions, and also a resource on common mistakes. So if you think of something later, feel free to send it to us, because we would love to, help someone else out by how you've overcome some of the, any challenges you may have had in submitting your APR.
We have a hand up from Flora.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, so one of the things to talk about, I've only done one APR. So for the first year, we had a lot of money we had not spent yet, funding we had not spent yet, because we started our recruitment a little bit late. So just being specific with that in the annual report, just explain and then specify, that you'll need that money for the following year or semester for the candidates recruited because they started the program late.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's very helpful. And we know sometimes when you start October 1 and the semester has started back in August. So there's a gap there. So just explaining that, and that's going to be expected, that there will be some carryover, especially, year one. But it's just important to make sure you keep up with the explanation as your budget should reduce from that large carryover from year one.
I have a common mistake. I don't mind sharing. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So last year was my first year, and I had completed everything and I was ready to go. And I, as we get busy, and I thought, oh, well, I have till Friday at 5. And keep in mind, it's Friday 5 East Coast time. And it wasn't just, oh, submit your information. You had to create an account and log in and if you have technical difficulties, it can be a challenge. So my mistake was waiting too long, getting too relaxed, and then encountering problems and an anxiety attack because I wasn't going to get it in on time. So that was my mistake.
Thank you, Sophia. And Sophia said, if you have technical problems, let me just be clear with you all. If you're not familiar with G5/G6, it is highly likely you will have technical problems. It's not a particularly user-friendly system, although I will say it has improved over time. I highly recommend you do all the work saved in Word before you try to start messing around with entering it. But definitely don't wait until the last day to start working on, even if you've created the report, to start entering it in G5. We did have a question in the chat earlier if we're going to run through G5, like the technical side today. We are not. We only scheduled an hour and we won't have time to do that. That's something perhaps we can schedule at a later date, or maybe we'll make a video and send it out to you all just kind of with the step-by-step of how to do that. That's beyond the focus that we're covering today, but definitely something you don't want to wait until the last minute to familiarize yourself with, because it can be time consuming and it can be a little tricky and temperamental. I do know there's a couple of other questions in the Q&A. I promise I'm going to answer them. I want to actually answer them to the group as a whole. And there's a couple answered under answered as well, if folks are curious to see the responses. I'm going to let Lisa ask her question and then Brandy.
I was just going to make a comment, something that I ran into the first time I submitted one of these, or I think maybe the first couple times, was that G5 likes some browsers better than others. And so I kept getting an error and I couldn't figure out why. I thought I was following all the rules. And so I typically use Chrome, but sometimes just keep that in mind because that caused headache for me.
Yeah, and I actually was going to say exactly that when you were talking, Liz. I was going to say exactly what Lisa just said. It's a little quirky about browsers. I will add, though, that the G5/6 help desk is very responsive. And so I have found that when I have gotten into last minute issues or trouble with the browser, sending an email to them, they have been very, very responsive and they are very quick to get back with you. Not to say wait to the last minute, don't do that, but it is, I did want to mention that, but yeah, the browsers are quirky.
All right, thank you for that, Lisa and Brandy. I can't see all the hands, but are there any other common mistakes that you want to share?
Are we ready to move on to the Q&A?
Yeah, I think we can move on, Q&A.
Great. So I did answer 2 questions already in the Q&A. One was about what is considered a large available balance. I think you can all read the answered questions in the Q&A. So if you wanted to see the answer to that, it is there. And somebody asked who you contact to understand when funds are drawn down, and I put a response there. Some other questions. Somebody asked, is there a specific due date for Scholar data? I believe that was referring to the PDPDCS data entry system. The deadline this year is March 28th. So if you have not yet completed all your Scholar data entry into that system, be sure you've done that by March 28th, which is next week. Somebody asked, will we be sharing sample APRs? We do not have that ready to do today, but that's a great idea. That's something we can pull together. Maybe we'll pull some pieces from existing APRs and share that with our group of folks who are the cohort 1 for X and M, so they have some help with that. This is exactly the sort of information we're going to be sharing later on our website once we have folks signed up in the backend login groups. We don't want to put that information publicly on our universal website, but those are exactly the sorts of information we'll be sharing with you all to support you once you're engaged in the back end of our system, which we can definitely chat more about. So we have a question about, can we review the type of objectives such as GEPRA, program, and project from the pull-down menu, and where to find the program goals in the letter? So is it correct that none of the goals are GEPRA goals? Okay. Don, I don't know if you want to speak about the GEPRA versus the program versus the project, but I will say that we are going to break in just a minute or two after we get through the Q&A. We're going to go into 2 separate breakout rooms. Don is going to take the X grantees to an X breakout room, and I'm going to take the M grantees to an M breakout room. And within those rooms, we're going to go over the program goals, because there's different program goals for the X grantees and the M grantees. So we're going to talk about those separately by grant type and show you examples of how to align your specific project goals with the program goals. But Don, do you want to speak to the GEPRA goals briefly before we do that?
Sure. Let me just, I think I'm off mute. Yeah, so the GEPRA goals relate to their overall program goals. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the actual acronym. I'll make sure that I put it in the chat, but they're the overall grant program goals. So they're larger goals that OSEP collects data on. So it's government performance goals, but the project and performance, the project or the program goals are specific to the 325, which is personnel prep program. So one is overall kind of government goals, one is the personnel prep program goals, and then your project goals are specific to your project.
And just as like a little pro tip, when you're pulling down from that status chart to select which one, you're generally never selecting GEPRA for what you're entering. You're either selecting program to refer to those ones that everybody that has an X or an M has to enter, or project referring to the ones that are specific to your grant. And I just answered another question in the answered regarding how to upload different pieces to G6.
Yeah, I also want to just comment too, Liz, on your response to large available balance. There is a magic percentage, but there's not a magic number. So that number is based upon a certain percentage of the project's overall budget. And so that's going to differ for each, for each project. So there's no like magic number. It's just the, a percentage over for your particular project. Okay, do we have any more questions before we break out into groups?
So if you click on the icon that says breakout rooms, are they ready yet, Maria?
And
okay,
I did
so
look at the for everybody, GEPRA, Government Performance and Results Act.
Thank you.
And we just appreciate everybody's time and participation. And we're here, to help you submit a successful APR. And don't forget our evaluation tool to complete that. And just once again, thanks to everyone.